Now, welcome to another edition of Battle of the Heroes and Villains, where this time we'll be taking a look at the results of the poll for Vice Admiral Holdo, comparing them to all the other characters we've done thus far and seeing where she ranks, and then I'll be reading and responding to some of your comments. But before any and all of that, you can of course already nominate and or vote for which character we do next. Just respond to my pinned comment below with a character name, or vote with a thumbs up if the one you'd like to see is already listed. Whatever comment gets the most votes in the next 24 hours or so will be the winner and the character we do next. Alright, and now onto the poll for Admiral Holdo, where we'll see that 71% of voters gave her an F, 15% then gave her a D, 9% thought she was C tier material, which left 3% to give her a B, and a final 2% to give her an A. And so when we do all the math here and consider A a score of 5 and F a score of 1, Admiral Holdo ends up with an average score of 1.50, which of course puts her into last place overall. And this is the part of the video where I'll mention that yes, these results are going to be biased or skewed to some degree. I'm not saying that I think she'd do amazing if a very pro-sequel trilogy channel conducted the same poll, but she'd likely do better than this to some degree. Because, as you likely know, I am not a huge fan of the sequels. You can, of course, love and enjoy them all you want. That's completely fine. But I think they missed the mark in many ways, and one of my biggest issues that I took with them was actually the Holdo maneuver. I've made an entire video about it and had a very overly dramatic clickbait title to it, like how it ruined Star Wars. But that's because I strongly feel it is probably one of the worst things ever introduced into the canon, and it calls into question many previous battle tactics. However, despite my dislike of the character, I will try to be as fair as I can here. I'll try to play a bit of a devil's advocate at times, perhaps. But mostly, yeah, I'm going to agree with a lot of what people have to say here. Anyway, before getting to those comments, let me once again very quickly say thank you to everyone who does indeed vote, comment, and to those who watch the videos. It's all very much appreciated. And now let's begin, as we always do, with the top-rated comment, which this time came to us from Darth Revan, who said, "Imagine lying to your entire crew and having a mutiny because you didn't want to tell everyone you were going to pull a kamikaze." Okay, so to be fair here, I don't think her original plan was to eventually kamikaze. I think the plan was for everyone to sneak down to Crate, including her, and for the ships to just keep going on autopilot until they ran out of fuel and were, hopefully, just destroyed by the First Order without them thinking twice, without them maybe trying to take the ship or board the Raddus for possible intel, to make sure this was indeed the last of the Resistance. You'd also have to hope, assuming they did just eventually blow the ships up, that they wouldn't investigate the wreckage at all afterwards and come to realize that some transport ships might be missing, or that there was no organic remains in the debris, that there were no bodies essentially, or that both were actually the case, and then realize they had abandoned ship and go looking for them in the only logical place they could probably be, which is Crate, that habitable planet they had flown past a little ways back. And yes, if the Raddus had an autopilot, and why wouldn't it, you can ask, why did Holdo have to be the one to kamikaze? Couldn't the autopilot do it, or even a droid? Or did she just not want to take the risk that something could or would go wrong? Yet another problem is we can go back to an episode of Clone Wars, the one where Anakin messes with the nav computer of the Malevolence, and when the Separatists engage the hyperdrive, the computer automatically adjusts the course of the ship. It essentially turns it towards the planet all on its own, meaning the hyperdrive and nav computer on the Raddus probably would have done the same thing and not required Holdo to be there to actually activate the hyperdrive and turn the ship around and so on. Alright, and next up here we have this comment from The Wanderer, who said, "I have to give her an F, but not for the reasons you might think. From her odd character design to her shoehorned-in backstory to the downright hostile way she treats her officers, going against anything I have ever heard from a real military officer. Everything Vice Admiral Admiral Holdo is a walking contradiction. The way she commands contradicts her reputation, the way she dresses contradicts her military standing, her reasoning for her decisions contradicts the decisions themselves. She was clearly written by someone who has no military knowledge, and was put in solely as a plot device to teach Poe a lesson. While I think Admiral Ackbar or even Leia should have been in charge, I am glad neither of them was so horribly mishandled." Okay, so though, yes, I do pretty much agree with everything you had to say there, to again be fair or to sort of play devil's advocate, I have heard from military members who say that Holdo types do certainly exist, that there are COs who are just complete asses for the sake of being asses, and they expect you to follow orders and to never ever ask questions and to like it. And in theory, that is how the military command structure is basically supposed to work. You can't have subordinates always questioning and second-guessing you. The military is not a democracy, which is not to say you should never listen to or take advice from subordinates. However, this situation in The Last Jedi was not your normal, everyday situation. This wasn't an officer messing with their subordinates on a random Tuesday just because she could. This was not only life and death, but the fate of the galaxy was on the line. It also wasn't split-second decision-making time, where there isn't a chance to think things over, much less talk them over and come up with a plan. Because if it had been, if Holdo had to make a decision on the fly right then and there about what to do, then yes, I'd argue Poe and everyone else should have just followed her orders, and they likely would have. But they had like 18 hours to figure out a way out of this mess. She had all this time to sit down with her officers and to hear other ideas, and discuss her plan, and at the very least, maybe optimize it. Instead, she didn't even technically say she had a plan. She basically said, just have faith, and to me, that is the true failing of Holdo. Okay, and moving on then, we have this comment from Ryan Sapiendante, probably saying that wrong, my apologies. Anyway, they had this to say. If she told everyone her plan, Poe wouldn't need Finn and Rose to find a codebreaker. They wouldn't need to find DJ, they wouldn't be betrayed, the First Order wouldn't find their plan, and half the Resistance wouldn't have died. Okay, so I have no real devil's advocate to this one, because the simple truth when we look at the structure of the movie is that the character of Holdo exists in this film solely to see to it that everyone else will fail because the movie wanted everyone to fail. It really wanted to push this message that failure is the greatest teacher. And the problem with this is it doesn't do anything to mask that fact that she is just this plot device, and she lacks any sort of characterization or reason for being the way that she is in the first place. Furthermore, giving her this heroic death is just a cheap way to imply she was right and noble the whole time, and they should have all just listened to her, that she is paying for their mistakes. When in reality, you see through it and you don't care that she's sacrificing herself, because you understand she was a terrible leader the whole time. But anyway, let's move on to this comment from Kelvin Mendoza, who said, "Dislike the character, but never the actress/actor. People need to remember this." And I mean, I very much agree, and I do think most people do remember that. That you should always separate the actor from the character, that Laura Dern was just doing her job and playing this part she was asked to play in this movie. Now, if she did a horrible job portraying the character, that'd be one thing. But for better or worse, I think she played the character exactly as Rian Johnson wanted her to. Alright, and moving on now, we have this comment from Martin P., who said, "Leadership and obedience are the two legs on which a warrior's life is balanced. Without both, victory cannot be achieved. Leadership depends on information and comprehension, not so obedience. Sometimes a commander may choose to share details of his plan, often he may not. In either case, obedience must be instant and complete. Such automatic responses relies on trust between commander and those commanded, and that trust can only be obtained through leadership." And this is a quote taken from Grand Admiral Thrawn. Next up then, this comment from Justin Norris, who said, "If the Holdo maneuver is 1,000,000 to 1 shot, then Holdo is either hyper-incompetent, terminally stupid, or a traitor, grade F-." Also got this one from Nikos Grease 011, who said, "I just want to say this, the Holdo move was 1 in a million. If it was that rare, wasn't she trying to escape and leave the Resistance in Snoke's hands?" Then also this one from The Annoyed Link, who said, "You bet the survival of the Resistance on bad odds," proceeds to bet the survival of the Resistance on a 1 in a million maneuver. Okay, so there's this part of me that respects that The Rise of Skywalker tried to explain the Holdo maneuver, that it acknowledges that, yes, this is something that needs to be explained, why it has never been used before, and likely will never be used again. Problem is, they almost made the whole thing worse by trying to explain it, because if it is 1 in a million, why was the First Order so terrified when she started to turn around and it dawned on them what she was going to do? Poe also seemed to think this was going to work. I mean, sure, when you buy a lottery ticket, you think, I got a chance at winning the jackpot, but you don't really think you have a chance at winning the jackpot. And so, if anything, Hux should have laughed it off and pulled a Tarkin when she started to turn the ship around and said something that she's overestimating her chances, and then I guess it somehow works still. But anyway, in hindsight, saying it's 1 in a million almost makes it seem like she thought she wasn't going to crash into them, that she wasn't actually intending to sacrifice herself, Like she thought maybe she could escape that way, or at the very least draw some of their forces off. I don't know. Alright, and next up here we have this comment from Better Late Than Never who said, "Am I not supposed to trust the guy who gave Leia the responsibility of finding the most important person in the galaxy over some wannabe leader, especially after he just saved the lives of several of the vessels still flying?" Also, this one from Arthur Godwin who said, "Have to love how she acknowledged no respect for Poe after he destroyed Starkiller Base and got tortured to secure the map to Luke. Of course, it's not like any of that mattered anyway in this movie." Also, we have this one from Bassmasta93 who said, "She tells Poe, 'You're the last thing we need right now.' Meanwhile, Poe destroyed Starkiller Base like 24 hours before." And again here, the structure of the actual movie is way too obvious here, or when it comes to the Poe story arc. We have to have Poe do something right at the very start of the movie that suddenly gives us the impression that he is a hothead and that he is not to be trusted, so that his arc in the movie and the whole theme of the film itself will eventually work. Problem is, this is done after, in the last movie, he was shown to be the most trusted person Leia had. She sent him to get the map to Luke after all, and that he also led the attack and almost single-handedly blew up Starkiller Base. Not to mention, Poe is a very likable character in that first movie. He immediately gravitates to Finn and seems to genuinely care about him, to care about an enemy stormtrooper, and that sort of endears him to us. And then, like, literally the next day in terms of the story, he's like this different character, and Poe is leading this attack on a dreadnought where he's like, "Nah, I don't care about anyone else as much as I care about blowing this ship up right now. I don't care that it might cost me my entire squadron," basically. Okay, and moving on now, we have this comment from Darth Malik who said, "A leading officer such as Pong Krell is written to be frustrating to watch because of how much we despise him. So although we hate him, he is a good character. Holdo was written to be the heroic officer, yet her character felt bland and antagonistic to Poe, who was one of our heroes, so she was meant to be loved yet ended up being a bad character." We also have this comment from Jessica Abel, who said, "She expected complete, unquestioning loyalty from a crew who barely knew her, and was surprised when they had no trust in her leadership. Their predecessors were rebels. Did she think unwavering, unearned trust was what they were down for? They have a history of distrusting shady leadership." Also then this one from AG Historian who said, "Literally the first thing I thought after her first scene was, damn, she's a mole. She has some connections to the First Order. She gave you that vibe the whole time, and every step of Poe's mental development, I went with him. Good God, he is one of the most loyal people in the Resistance, and she cannot for the life of her trust him, even enough to tell him her grand plan, which wasn't even a good one, but more a calculated gamble anyway. All this made no sense, and what's the message here? To blindly obey despite having a highly suspicious leader? Why the weird, I like him part afterwards? Why? Also have this comment from Isle of James who said, "I've often said that Admiral Holdo is like General Krell, except instead of the illogical conclusion that they are a traitor, we are somehow supposed to believe that Holdo is the good guy." And the funny thing is, with a few tweaks, Holdo could have been a great Pong Krell type character / villain, a great First Order spy purposely sabotaging everything for us to uncover throughout the course of the film. Because as it stands right now, we're supposed to automatically somehow trust and like her more than Poe, who again was likable in that previous film. And that'd be similar to being expected to like and trust Pong Krell more so than Rex and the rest of the 501st in that Umbara story arc. Okay, and next up here then we have this comment from Erica Polly who said, "I will never forgive the fact that they killed Admiral Ackbar and chose to put her in charge. He died and I didn't even know it was him because he was in the background." And I couldn't agree more. It was such a wasted opportunity to do something with a fan favorite character like Ackbar, one who started fighting for his people during the Clone Wars, kept fighting into the Galactic Civil War, and came back to fight once more for the Resistance. And he dies by being blown out into space without any fanfare, much less even being mentioned by anyone that, maybe they miss him and we lost a great hero. And all because Rian Johnson either didn't know or maybe care that fans would have loved to have seen Ackbar play an important role in one of the films, and certainly over a brand new and poorly written character like Holdo. And so, in the wise words of Yoda, I say to Rian Johnson, that is why you fail. Alright, and now time for a few final comments before wrapping this up, starting with this one from Eric Smith who said, "She spent more time trying to teach Poe a lesson than keeping her crew confident in their survival." Then we have this one from Michael Bishop, who said, I'd give her about a D. Even though I actually like the sequels, I really dislike Holdo's snobby attitude towards Poe, and her apparent lack of competent leadership skills. She tries to inspire the crew, but fails to explain how her plan will work, much less how it benefits the entire crew. Someone once described her as being like that mean teacher you have in high school. I think that's a pretty accurate description. So while I don't think she's the worst Star Wars character ever made, she's certainly not one of the best either. Next then, this one from Nick Vegas, who said, the character of Holdo in the Princess Leia novel is actually interesting and plays off of Leia way better. It's like Johnson read a synopsis of that book, and somehow the only element he took from any of that information is that the Holdo character has quirky hair colors because the way Holdo is written in The Last Jedi is nothing like her book counterpart. Baffling. Then we got this one from Red Cross Reject, who said, if she were intentionally written to be evil, then I would respect her as a piece of writing like Professor Umbridge. Then this one from Ruben Garcia, who said, I thought there was going to be a twist like in Winter Soldier that she works for the enemy and that's how the First Order had the advantage, and then building up a big battle in the ship to kill Leia and Poe, with the Resistance fighting Holdo with First Order disguised as Resistance. Also, we have this one from Sally Bradshaw, who said, she's got cool hair, I'll give her that, and Laura is a fantastic actress, but her lack of communication with her allies and her unjust placement of blame on people like Poe is just gross. Also, this one from Scotski02, who said, if being a spiteful, toxic, ineffective bully of a leader was what Ryan had intended her to be, I'd rate her higher, but him being delusional enough to actually think she was in the right puts her squarely at the bottom tier, or in the bottom tier. And finally here, this comment from Richard Rugjari, probably saying that wrong, my apologies. Anyway, Richard had this to say, I understand that Ryan was trying to use Holdo to get growth out of Poe's character, but the entire concept of her character was strained. She's a military member, not civilian leadership, of the Resistance, yet she doesn't wear a uniform. She is purposely antagonistic towards Poe and keeps people in the dark on the plans, which strains belief. Her sacrifice makes little sense. Can't droids fly the ship? Using Ackbar and having him blame Poe for the deaths and then allow Ackbar this sacrifice would have meant more to fans at least. And well, that's all I've got for you this time. This video has been long enough. And now it's your turn to tell me what you think of Admiral Holdo or about what I or anyone else had to say about her in this video. Either that or do feel free to nominate and vote for which character we do next. One way or another though, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.